days, but what some people sometimes don't realize is that in fact we're able to do that programming because of the foresight and the generosity of the Kennedy family nearly 30 years ago, and of the many friends of the family, and as well as millions of Americans who contributed to the Memorial Fund. And that fund became the endowment for the Presidential Library and became the endowment for the Institute of Politics, and indeed is the basis of our activities today. As you know, one of the extraordinary things about this institution is its reach. The fact that it reaches thousands and thousands of lives directly through their participation, whether as students or leaders in the programs here at the Institute, but indeed to millions of people here and even around the world through television that carries much of what goes on here in our forum. Well, one of the things that has, of course, been on our agenda this year has been the presidential race. And as you know, one of the things that presidential candidates and other candidates struggled to do during the campaign, and indeed it still goes on after the campaign, is to try to define where we are in America today and where are we headed. And sometimes the rhetoric gets a little excessive. Sometimes there are those that are in the vein of Chicken Little, and there are sometimes those in the vein of not only Chicken Little, but also in the vein of Pollyanna. But many, unfortunately, sometimes follow Charles Dickens. It's sort of on the one hand, it's the best of times, and on the other hand, it's the worst of times. Well, the person I'm about to introduce is trying to make sure we look at this question in a way that is more than just rhetorical, and I'm speaking about the new dean of the Kennedy School of Government. Joe Nye comes to us, of course, as a renowned scholar, previously here on the faculty at Harvard and the Kennedy School, previously serving at the top levels of our State Department and of the Defense Department, as well as being an advisor to the White House, and indeed a scholar in matters of international security affairs. But what makes it relevant and why I brought Chicken Little and Pollyanna into this is because what he is leading here at the school is a very special effort, bringing together academics and practitioners to look at where we are and what we need to be doing in the 21st century. Indeed, he has a new program called Visions of Governance in the 21st Century. So I'm very pleased to bring our new strong leader before you to welcome you tonight. Dean Joe Nye.
Thanks, Phil. One of the things that I've learned is that, nice introductions notwithstanding, deans can't take themselves too seriously. And I owe that to many facts, but certainly I was reminded tonight by one of the former IOP fellows who was here. I won't mention her name. She said, "What do you do?" And I thought, you know, that's probably a good come-downance. And it beat some of the other dean's jokes that I've heard. But it did strike me that the Kennedy School endowment went up more when there was no dean than there was. So there is somebody can fix the sound system. There is a question of what deans are for, but what deans are for, at least for this evening, is to say just a couple of minutes of how important the Institute of Politics is and what enormous contribution it's made to the Kennedy School. The conception of bringing real live politicians into a school of government and public service was a brilliant conception. We owe a lot to Dick Neustadt and to the Kennedy family for the accomplishment that the Institute has been. It's in a sense something which has added a dimension to training and to understanding of the political system that wouldn't be the same without it. When we had a meeting of the Visions of Governance for the 21st Century project this summer, the fact that we were able to have former members of Congress participating in it, the fact that we have Institute fellows running study groups and participating in things here, has made all the difference in the world of distinguishing the Kennedy School from, let's say, the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton or the School of Organization and Management at Yale. I think it makes us a school which is much more in tune with what politics and the real life of policy really is. And to that, we're deeply grateful for the founders, who you'll hear more about tonight. And though not a founder, one of the people who was really essential in the Kennedy School's history and development was Ron Brown. And you'll hear more about that as well tonight. But I think the point that's worth remembering is that the Institute of Politics brings to the undergraduate body of Harvard College and to the master's students here at the Kennedy School a sense of why politics is, despite all the cynicism, a noble calling. That without politicians who are able to knit us together, we would not be a happy democracy, we would be a Bosnia. And I think it's worth remembering that dimension of politics. And in a much more parochial and immediate sense, I should say that on Tuesday, if you'd been in this room and had looked at the big screen above my head, you would have seen the names of 15 members of the Kennedy School and the Institute of Politics who had just been in the melee of live politics, and you would have found that 13 of the 15 had won, which I think is also a good sign. So we here at the school believe that the Institute of Politics has been a major innovation, a major contributor to Harvard College and to the Kennedy School of Government, and we're here to celebrate its first 30 years, and though I won't be dean on the 60th anniversary celebration, we're looking forward to the next 30 equally. So thank you very much.
Lest you are becoming concerned, please feel free to go ahead and begin eating. That is, of course, in the tradition not of Miss Manners, but of the Institute of Politics, where we carry on a great deal of discussion around food. Usually there's not been a dearth of food. I'm only going to spend a couple more minutes and to suggest to you a couple things that we hope you might engage in this evening, and we'll save the rest of our program for after the meal. But I did want to just quickly run through with you just some of the activities that the Institute was able to sponsor, given our students, our fellows, and the involvement of many of you related to the presidential election this year, just as a flavor of the kinds of things that we do and can do. As you may know, we started this campaign cycle with a presidential campaign conference here in the Forum. We had a bazaar where the campaigns from New Hampshire were present and could round up volunteers from the Harvard campus to take up and work in those primary elections. We had speakers on all aspects of how you run a presidential campaign, and it gave our students an opportunity to interact with these folks, whether they were Republican, Democrat, or the independent political parties. And indeed, in this particular instance, we had students from around New England. It was broader than just our usual Harvard audience. We also hosted here a national conference on voter registration to help plant around the country on other campuses units that would go out and undertake student drives to register students and get them engaged in politics this year. Our forum, as you undoubtedly have seen from the schedule, was just a plethora of activities related to all kinds of issues, presidential candidates, all kinds of discussions by people who are engaged in advocacy of all kinds of issues. Indeed, much of that was televised and shared with the rest of the country. Our students, for example, this fall, under the aegis of the Presidential Library, went out, and some pretended to be Bob Dole and some pretended to be Bill Clinton, and they debated each other before students in the public school system around the Boston community. Last Tuesday night, as already been alluded, we had a jam-packed crowd here to follow the returns, and indeed our fellows, as they participated in so many other things, provided instant analysis as the evening went on. And our fellows, of course, have been running study groups that are quite related to the campaign, both how to do it, what kind of advocacy that they personally have brought to bear in this system. But of course, the event that was the one, I think, for which we are proudest was HYPE, Harvard Youth for Political Empowerment. And I would urge you at every table, we tried to make sure that you have present one of our students from the Student Advisory Committee. and they can explain to you, if you have not already seen the videotape or seen the pictures or you didn't see it on national television, just what went on with this event where over 3,000 Harvard students came together on Saturday afternoon. And I must say, while we are a little upset with Mother Nature about the weather because it has actually kept a number of folks from getting here tonight because their planes were canceled in Washington or in New York, we can't complain too much because on our key event, which was an outdoor event where we could only have managed 3,000 students if we were outdoor, the sun shone. So here at the IOP, we have a special fondness for Mother Nature, whether you do or not. Now, next month, the election for us is still not over, and indeed we have two compelling conferences coming up. One will be the traditional Campaign Decision Makers Conference, where the people who have engaged in running the major presidential campaigns, Republican, Democrat, and Independent, will come together to discuss what they think they were doing and what they accomplished and what they thought they were doing to each other and who was helping whom and who was hurting whom, and a record of that will be made and be available for the future. And then on December 11th through 14th, we'll be having our new members of Congress training program here at the school. So if our staff looks a little exhausted, there is a good reason for it, and I think it would be appropriate that I at this point make a special thanks to the members of the staff of the Institute of Politics who have worked very hard. Would all of the staff of the Institute please stand so people can see who you are? Of course, well, I certainly believe they deserve that enthusiastic response because they are not only talented and energetic, but as I think all of you who have dealt with them personally know, they are absolutely committed to our mission, and they are believers in making things work. And that's absolutely critical to carrying off these multiple programs. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll not only talk about hype at your tables, but I hope if you have ideas on how we can carry out our mission, one portion of which is to make sure we are giving maximum opportunities to our students to hone their skills in advocacy, hone their skills in organization, in leadership, in writing, in speaking, in engaging in our political process. Tell us how we can do it better. We also want to engage you, if we can, in what we should be doing to make sure that the good things we are doing here are, to the extent we're capable of doing it, available to students elsewhere around this country, if not around the world. And of course, partly through technology, we are already able to do that. And then finally, if you have ideas on how we can make sure we carry out our mission in bringing together practitioners and academics to engage in some of the tough, substantive issues that face our country, we need your help in that. And again, I hope you would use our students, whom we use regularly and we count on incredibly, as a funnel by which you get your ideas back to us at the IOP. Well, as a politician, I know it is very unwise to get between the voter and his or her meal. So at this point, I'm going to close this part of the program. We hope you enjoy your conversation at the table, and we'll all be returning in a few moments. Thank you. And sing special distinction, suggesting that everybody else is undistinguished. But I think it is appropriate that we identify at least two of the folks who were present at the creation, indeed helped create the Institute of Politics, apart from Senator Kennedy himself, who you'll be hearing from later. Ladies and gentlemen, one of our most distinguished, well, how can I say it? He helped create the Institute. He's a vital part of the Institute yet today. We call on him regularly to come over and talk with our students and to be on programs in the forum. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor John Kenneth Galbraith. I have to tell you, sir, back in Indiana. They keep telling me they have seen me on television here at the IOP, but the reason they did was because of John Kenneth Galbraith and Studs Terkel, one of our most popular programs that C-SPAN has run over and over again. The other person that's here tonight that was more than just present at the creation, who indeed set the entire pattern because he was the first director of the Institute of Politics, an aide to the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, is of course our own Richard Neustadt. Richard Neustadt continues to be a vital part of our activities. We call on him regularly. He ran our session, as did John Kenneth Galbraith. Frankly, the two of them were our Wednesday night featured discussants at the traditional IOP dinner following the presidential election. Well, I want to turn now to a very serious part of our program, and yet we hope will be an uplifting part of our program. As you all know, Ron Brown was a vital force in American politics. And he was a vital force here at the Institute of Politics, giving of his time and his talent and his energy. And as so many of you came in touch with him here, as you might have elsewhere in our society. And so we have a few folks that we want to bring forward to say a few words about him who worked with him closely while they were here at Harvard. I'm very pleased to introduce Stephen Hawkins. He graduated from Harvard College in the class of 1984. He was a member of the Student Advisory Committee to the Institute, and he was the study group liaison for Ron Brown in the fall of 1980 when Ron was a fellow here at the Institute of Politics. He's been a lawyer at the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, and he's currently the executive director of the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Hawkins.
Thank you very much, and it is indeed an honor to be here. Ron and I were freshmen together in many ways. I met Ron my freshman year back in 1980, and I graduated in 4 years, but Ron, well, he never graduated from here. In many ways, Ron never left. And Ron left quite a lasting legacy here. But I want to spend a few minutes talking about how I knew Ron. And I'd like to share with you the several ways that I got to know this remarkable individual. I first remember Ron as a great teacher. I was a participant in his 1980 study group here, and we dissected the 1980 presidential elections. The study group was by far my most engaging class at Harvard that year. And it was all due to the quality of the instructor. Ron was knowledgeable, perceptive, and able to combine theory with praxis from his experiences as a campaign manager, and he was able to stimulate debate and generate ideas, and perhaps most of all, the love of the subject matter that became infectious for those who had the opportunity to engage in the study group. That was Ron, the teacher that I knew. I also remember Ron as someone who made my job as a student liaison quite enjoyable. Ron delighted in the interaction with students, and despite a busy schedule, and believe me, I had to keep up with Ron many times, he always made himself accessible, though. I can recall dragging him around campus to various activities, but what he most enjoyed was sitting with my colleagues, my peers in the freshman union dining hall. And yes, I subjected him to the food of the freshman union, which I recall he said reminded him of the Army. But Ron always enjoyed that, delighted in the interaction with students. And I also remember Ron in a very personal way. Ron was an inspiration for me in many ways. I was an African-American kid from a poor family who came to Harvard in 1980. I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer and to do something with my life in the public interest. Ron helped me to see that I could achieve my dreams, that my hopes and my dreams were possible. He told me of his Harlem roots, of his struggles, and he helped me to believe that I could achieve. Ron became a mentor for me, taking out the time to discuss with me my future and what I wanted to do with my life. At the end of our year together, Ron asked me, did I want to come work with him down in Washington? But I had other plans, but he said that the door would always be open. Well, I never had the chance to work with Ron or to take up his offer, but I did have the chance to experience his warmth and his caring at another point in my life. It concerned a man named Joseph Giritano, a man who had been sentenced to death in the state of Virginia, and around whose case there had come to be very troubling questions of innocence. Ron was serving as DNC chair at the time, and he wrote a letter to Governor Wilder back then and urged the governor that if there was any question in his mind about Joe Giritano's guilt, that he should commute the sentence to life. I could not help to admire Ron at that time, for from his position of prominence, he had refused to turn his back on someone who most of the society would consider the most despised. Governor Wilder did commute that sentence, and later on in his term, he would commute another death sentence where there was questions of innocence yet remaining. I thought of Ron's heartfelt letter last night when Governor Allen, a Republican governor in Virginia now, commuted the sentence of a man named Joe Payne, where there was also troubling questions of innocence. And I see that all as part of Ron's legacy, the ability to teach us to temper our laws with human compassion, to understand that governance is about having a sense of humanity. That is Ron's, I think, deep and lasting legacy. And yes, I remember most about Ron, his warm smile, his dapper suits, and that forever sparkle that he had in his eyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We're now very pleased to have with us Iris Choi. Iris comes from Monterey, California. She was a member of the Harvard class of 1997, and she interned in the summer of 1995 in the Commerce Department on one of the internships sponsored by the Institute of Politics, a program that Ron Brown helped inspire and always helped us to fulfill. Ladies and gentlemen, Iris Choi.
You'll have to excuse me if I seem a little nervous, because I'll be honest with you, I very much am. But as I was walking down here, I realized that one of the last times that I felt quite this nervous was probably when I was advancing Secretary Brown into a speech that the president gave on affirmative action. And I remember thinking to myself as I walked with him, Iris, please calm down. The president is the one giving the speech, not you. And I can honestly say that at this point, I would give anything to be able to say those words again and have them be true. But seeing as how I am the one giving the speech, and it is in honor of Secretary Brown, I will put my best effort for it. So Director Sharp, distinguished guests, and friends at the Institute of Politics, my name is Iris Choi, and I'm a senior at Harvard University. 2 summers ago, I had the distinct honor of serving as an intern to Secretary Ron Brown at the Department of Commerce. As an economics concentrator with an interest in public service, an internship at the Commerce Department seemed to me an ideal opportunity to witness the application of economic theory to public policy formulation. The 8 weeks which I spent in Washington, D.C. proved invaluable in more ways than one. From an academic perspective, my work on the Big Emerging Markets Conference sparked my current interest in developmental economics. My interactions with representatives from the other cabinet offices helped me realize the shared responsibilities between the departments within one administration. Yet the experience which left the strongest impression in my mind was a basic lesson in respect from Secretary Brown himself. My first encounter with the gentleman, who required no further introduction than the Secretary, occurred on the 2nd day of my internship. The Secretary was meeting with senators in the afternoon, and I was asked to join him and 3 others on Capitol Hill. As I nervously found my way around the Hart Building, I was met by a member of the advance team who advised me that in walking with the secretary, I should neither speak nor stare, and generally avoid drawing attention to myself. Taking these words to heart, I seem to have been successfully playing the role of the invisible intern. That is, until the 5 of us stepped into an elevator. As I tried my hardest to assume the gray complexion of the elevator walls, the secretary promptly looked in my direction, smiled kindly, and asked bluntly, "Who are you?" As I attempted to stammer a response, a member of the advance team came to my rescue, explaining that I was the intern from the IOP. As soon as these 3 letters were mentioned, a bright smile spread across his face as he replied, "Ah yes, the IOP intern. We've been waiting for you." From that moment forward, I was never considered the intern whom others suggest linger in the background and watch from afar. Rather, I was treated with the dignity and respect which the secretary felt a student eager to learn about public service deserved. Rather than viewing my accompaniment on his trips to the Hill as a nuisance, the secretary was concerned with my comfort, asking if I was tired from all the walking, and even apologizing for conditions, such as the heat in Washington, D.C., which I assumed were outside of his control. He consistently asked the other staff members to make sure that I got home safely after the evening events. And he periodically checked in on me to ask how my internship was progressing. As an intern in his Office of Advance and Scheduling, I realized firsthand that the secretary was indeed a very busy man. I was continually amazed by the enthusiasm and grace with which he balanced his demanding lifestyle, traveling across the country and to other nations, on trade missions and in support of U.S. businesses. I was, however, most impressed by the dignity and sincerity with which he treated others. It still amazes me that Secretary Brown, a distinguished and respected leader, would find it only natural to take the time and the initiative to get to know his interns. And I think my peers at the IOP will agree that his relationship with the students at the Institute was one of mutual respect. On my last day at the Department of Commerce, I was invited to have my picture taken with the secretary. Upon entering his office, one of his assistants reminded me to reintroduce myself. So as the secretary entered, I approached him and said, "Hello, Secretary Brown. At which point he smiled, shook my hand, and said, "I know who you are. You're Iris from the IOP. I would never forget the IOP." More appropriately, Secretary Brown, I think that the IOP will never forget you. Thank you.
That was very nice, Iris. Thank you. We're now very pleased to have, as a further part of our program, our current chairman of the Senior Advisory Committee, Senator John Culver, who took over that position upon the death of Ron Brown. And I must say, Senator Culver has devoted himself to the Institute of Politics for many, many years. And I wish all of you could have been in our meeting this afternoon when our current Student Advisory Committee met with our Senior Advisory Board. Because the feedback I have gotten since that event from the students has been extremely positive. I might say it was positive on both sides, from board members and from the students, because what we saw was, again, the passion of Senator Culver for what this country ought to be doing and what politics ought to mean in America. And if there is a generation gap in this country, I think it's safe to say there was none there today in our meeting. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator John Culver.
Thank you very much, Phil, Iris and Steve, Professors Galbraith and Newstead, Senator Kennedy, Dean Nye, friends of Ron Brown, ladies and gentlemen. You were kind of you, Phil, to refer to me still as Senator Culver, even though I've been free of that responsibility now for 16 years. And I couldn't help but recall the story about the occasion when Perón and Eva Perón visited Franco in Spain many years ago, and on the occasion of that state visit, they were to attend the large cathedral in downtown Madrid, and as they approached the entrance to the church, there were ropes holding back the crowds of onlookers. And walking ahead was Franco and Perón, and then behind was Eva on the arm of a Spanish grandee, a friend of Franco's. And as they approached the church, there were peasant women in the crowd who started to shout, "Prostitute, prostitute, prostitute." And there was quite a bit of discomfort in the official party at that point, whereupon the Spanish grandee patted Eva on the arm and said, "That's all right, my dear. I've been out of the Army now 30 years. They still call me General." So I guess once you've been in the Congress, you can never live it down. One of my earliest and lasting recollections of the many times with Ron Brown were visiting him in his Institute of Politics office just a few steps away from where we assembled this evening. And it was the spring of 1981, and Ron was in the process of clearing out his desk, having just completed the semester as a fellow, as well as having completed a research project entitled Reform of the Primary System. And Ron greeted me with that wonderful warm smile and shared his enthusiasm regarding his experience that semester as a fellow, and above all, the genuine joy that he found working with the students. Fortunately for the Institute of Politics, Ron may have cleared out his desk that spring day, but as Steve has already observed, fortunately for all of us, he never really left this place. He continued his close relationship over the years with his former fellows, with students and staff, and he returned often. I noted the other day that in the John F. Kennedy room over at Winthrop House, there are more entries of visits by Ron Brown than any other person in the history of that memorial to the president. And that's most appropriate because I think it reflected his dedication, his devotion, and his love of this institution. In 1985, Ron joined the Senior Advisory Committee and shortly afterwards succeeded Lord David Harlech as the chairman. And Ron took this responsibility very seriously, and he always took it with grace and with charm and with wit. He mastered the large book of briefing materials that the staff always manages to put together and make available to us before every meeting. Not all of us can honestly say that who've attended these meetings over the years, but Ron was always prepared. And he always asked the right questions, and above all, he never failed to remind each of us on the Senior Advisory Committee that the Institute's mission was to stimulate the students' interest in politics and public service. His interest and commitment in turn to the work of the Institute was so great and personally meaningful to him that even after he was appointed Secretary of Commerce in the Clinton administration, he sought and received an exemption permitting him to continue to serve as chair. In a real sense, I believe Ron Brown's life and career represents the embodiment of the founding purpose of the Institute of Politics. First, by his inspiring personal example that we've already seen testimony about for the students in both politics and his public service work. And secondly, by his example of what the fellowship program in turn can mean to mid-career individuals who are seeking future opportunities and who still enjoy a potential for meaningful future contributions to public service. It can be truly said that Ron Brown's association and experience with the Institute was a case of the mission meeting the mission. In the early summer after his death, several former fellows and friends met with Teresa Donovan, the director of the fellowship program that so many of you know well. They met with her to discuss how this institute might best remember and honor Ron. It was agreed that Ron was a person of the future. He was exuberant, he was full of youthful optimism, and an internship program that encouraged undergraduates to get involved in politics and public life was felt to be the ideal way to help memorialize his extraordinary service. Each spring now, 4 students will be selected, beginning this year, to be interns for the following summer. And this internship will be a newly created program and will supplement all the existing programs that we now have at the Institute. The applicants will be undergraduates. The students who are selected will have demonstrated interest in politics and public service and will have exhibited a potential for future contribution. It's emphasized that there should be diversity of background and interest, then all that will be taken into account, and of course the selections will be on a bipartisan basis. All at the meeting last summer further agreed that one element of this application should include an essay on the life of Ron Brown and his accomplishments, and the idea that this could serve as an appropriate role model to inspire others and influence them in their own careers. Also, finally, in fitting with Ron's own background, interns will be selected from applicants interested in working in advocacy organizations, civil rights, minority interest politics for a political campaign or an individual, a political party, the White House, or a cabinet department. Funding for the program will come from private donations. It is estimated that $250,000 to $300,000 will be raised, and of course it will be named the Ronald H. Brown Political and Public Service Internship Program. Finally, a framed photograph of Ron will be hung in the Institute living room just over to the left. This is the place, as so many of you know, where fellows and students gather. And this will ensure that Ron never clears out his desk in this place, but rather his memory and example will remain to encourage as well as challenge students to actively participate in the politics of their time, to enjoy its rewards and its satisfactions, and through their contributions help maintain the continued strength and vitality of our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Culver. We appreciate that, and we already have the space reserved for the hanging of this special memorial plaque. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know from our program, we had anticipated Michael Brown and Alma Brown responding and acknowledging what we're doing here to honor Ron Brown, but unfortunately, because of the weather, they, with some of our other special guests, including John Kennedy Jr., were simply weathered out of being able to make it here, despite a frantic effort this afternoon to find alternative ways to get to this night's event. But I must say, over recent weeks and months, the Brown family has confirmed Ron's the importance of the IOP to Ron and to the family, and their pleasure at what we are trying to do here, with a special emphasis remaining on students and helping to expand student opportunities. I might also add that we have already begun the fund. The Kennedy family has made a very generous donation that is the basis of the new Ron Brown Fund. To that we owe thanks to Senator Kennedy, to John F. Kennedy Jr., to Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg, and indeed to the late Jacqueline Kennedy. Now, lest anyone feel left out, we believe in equal opportunity funding. Therefore, all other folks will have the opportunity to also make contributions, and we certainly will take many new and future opportunities to help people know how to do that. But we appreciate our special guest tonight, and as you know, we have a very great fondness for Ron here at the Institute of Politics. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker tonight. And as you know, it's the old saying, needs no introduction. But I owe this gentleman a special thanks that he probably can't even remember, because I don't think I've had occasion to publicly indicate this for many, many years. But in 1972, I was a candidate for office in Indiana, running for the U.S. House of Representatives. And this senator from Massachusetts was flown into the small airport in Muncie, Indiana, to what turned out to be, perhaps not for him, but for us, a gigantic rally to boost my candidacy for the U.S. Congress. He was a smash hit. The candidate did not get elected, at least not that year. And I must say, while President Kennedy quoted the ancient Chinese proverb that victory has many fathers, but defeat is always an orphan, the ancient Chinese didn't have it quite right, because when someone loses or there is a defeat, there are always people there with a paternity suit to identify who is responsible for this defeat. The local Republican newspaper identified myself as such. My campaign supporters identified George McGovern as such, and Richard Nixon, and we all found to have other excuses. Let's be frank, I finally learned and got it right and got elected the next time around. But it is our honor to have Senator Kennedy still very much involved with the Institute of Politics, as he was at the beginning 30 years ago. And you all know him as a powerful and important voice in America and in the United States Senate. We know him as a person who takes a personal interest in our activities, always interested in what our students are doing and not doing and what we could do more of. And he, again today, like Senator Culver, was engaged with our current Student Advisory Committee in ways that I've only had the opportunity to see 3 times. Some of them have seen as many as 8 times already, or 7 times. It'll be the 8th time this next semester. Ladies and gentlemen, the senior senator from Massachusetts, Edward Kennedy.
Thank you so much, Phil Sharp, for all you do for the Institute and all that you've meant to this wonderful effort that bears President Kennedy's name. And let me join with the others in thanking Steve and Iris so much for bringing back so many warm memories and doing it in such a meaningful and thoughtful and feeling way. And Dean Nye, who we thank him as well for welcoming us all here to the school. Since Senator Culver tried his opening joke, I thought I might try one. And that is, people have been thinking in the recent year or so that I was doing a little better politically, and so I thought I'd go down to the southern part of Virginia, very conservative part, and to see how my rap was going down there. And was down speaking at this luncheon, and the person that was the head of the luncheon was introducing me, and somebody came up and said, "Kennedy's a horse's tail," or words to that effect. And what do you know, someone got up from the table and they grabbed this person, they threw him out of the room. I was rather impressed with that, and I said, I didn't know that this was Kennedy country, and they said, "It isn't, it's horse country." And so, in any event, we all have our sense of humility about being here, whether we're generals or whatever else included. Let me say I am honored to join all of you this evening for the 30th anniversary of the Institute of Politics. Some people say, don't trust anyone over 30, but that's definitely not true here this evening. And I'm especially pleased that so many past and present members of the Advisory Committee could be with us. We had an excellent session, as Phil mentioned, with the current members earlier today, and I know how hard and well all of them have worked in preparation. My nephew, John, is not here this evening, as Phil has pointed out, weathered in with the bad weather along the East Coast this evening. I quite frankly have rather a mixed emotion about his being here or not being here. In the past, the student turnout for meetings when he was there was really outstanding. Everyone was saying how happy they were to meet me before rushing off to talk with him. I volunteered for cover duty for John's magazine, George, myself a few months ago, but John wasn't sure the magazine could sell enough copies with my belly button on the cover. What magnificent tributes we just heard to Ron Brown, and I know he would have loved to be here this evening with Alma and Michael and Tracy and Tammy and all of whom he loved so dearly, and with all of his friends and colleagues from the Institute that he loved and did so much for over the years. Ron was a very special friend to many of us. In truth, he was a man for all seasons in politics, the perfect blend of Harlem and Harvard. And from his own life's experience, he knew the importance of reaching out to young men and women. He felt that if they were inoculated as students with the ideals and possibilities of politics, then for the rest of their lives they would be active in public service, immunized against the cynicism that too often seems pervasive about politics today. Ron believed in government. He detested cynicism and the shameful politics of running for office by trashing the institutions you seek to lead. Ron was never too busy for the Institute. As chairman of the advisory committee for many years, he rarely missed a meeting or an opportunity to spend an evening in discussions and debates with the students here. He touched your lives, my life, and the Institute deeply, and we miss him very much. The past 2 years have been a fascinating roller coaster for all of us in politics. With the proliferation of TV channels, talk shows, columnists, and websites, it's hard to keep up, but I always know what to do. For the latest political news, I watch Chris Wallace on ABC. For current polls, I ask Doug Shane of Penn and Shane. For analysis, I read E.J. Dionne in the Washington Post or Walt Isaacson, Time Magazine. To go online, I click on Michael Kinsley at Slate. For advice on Middle East peace, I look at Bob Pastor at the Carter Center, and to learn what the White House is doing, I call Vicki Rad, partly to find out which of her many White House hats she's wearing now. And all of these leaders are former members of the Institute Student Board. And when I go around the country, people often come up to me and say they were on the board, or Institute Fellows, or gave a seminar, and they've never forgotten their experience here. It's a two-way street. In recent summers, we've also had the privilege on the Senate Labor Committee of having several IOP students work with us. In 1995, Seth Hanlon, Eric Olney put together a comprehensive research project on corporate welfare. They studied such items as the 1872 Mining Act, grazing fees, helium subsidies, sugar subsidies, tax subsidies, including the expatriate tax loophole, which allows billionaires to renounce their U.S. citizenship and avoid their fair share of taxes on the wealth they've accumulated in America. Last summer, Eric and Seth returned to the committee and resumed the projects with two new IOP interns, Eric Christopherson and Mike Pezant. Their research provided a valuable foundation for many of the issues we raised on the Senate floor in the last 2 years, helped make these issues a central part of the budget and welfare reform debates of the past 2 years. And their work has been important to our committee, and it's given them practical experience on Capitol Hill. It all began 30 years ago when Robert Kennedy and President Pusey signed an agreement to create the Institute as a living memorial to President Kennedy. It would fulfill one of Jack's cherished goals to bring the world of ideas closer to the world of politics. As Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said a century ago, explaining his lifelong passion for the law, through our great good fortune in our youth, our hearts were touched with fire. Bobby and I knew that when Jack was a student, something here at Harvard had kindled that kind of spark in him, and we hoped the Institute would do the same for succeeding generations of undergraduates. Throughout the years that Jack represented Massachusetts in Congress, he returned constantly to Harvard to discuss ideas and issues with people like Ken Galbraith, Arthur Schlesinger, Mac Bundy, Archie Cox, many others, because he believed in the benefits of linking politics and the academic world. And I have no doubt that after his service as president, he would have returned here to teach and write and talk politics with as many students as he could. The Institute of Politics is fulfilling that founding vision as indeed a living memorial to my brother's ideals. In the early years, it was a nucleus for the School of Government. The forum has witnessed hundreds of presentations on almost every conceivable public issue. The Fellows programs bring politicians, journalists, and citizen activists here to recharge their batteries and give students the benefit of their experience. It is said on Capitol Hill that it's almost worth losing an election if it means you get to spend 6 months at Harvard. I came a bit close to that opportunity myself a couple of years ago, but I was happy to defer the opportunity for a while longer. The Student Advisory Committee has become one of the most vigorous undergrad activities on the campus, enabling students to talk politics, test their courses and textbooks in the real world, plan programs, and make them happen. And there is no better way to learn about government. When a student can share a pizza with a member of Congress, a governor or mayor, or meet a leader of the women's movement at the airport and drive her to a seminar, personal connection is made that can light a lifelong spark in a student's mind. So I can begin to thank the many, many people whose dedication and hard work have created the success of the Institute. I think especially of President Pusey, who helped so much at the beginning, and President Bach, who made education for government service a major goal of his administration, and now President Rudenstein, Al Carneseo, Joe Nye, continuing that fine support. I also acknowledge the wise efforts of the directors, Dick Neustadt, Ernie May, Jonathan Moore, Mary McTighe, Shirley Williams, Dick Thornburg, Charlie Royer, and Phil Sharp. And of course, those who have chaired the Senior Advisory Committee, Averil Harriman and David Harlick, John Sherman Cooper and Ron Brown, and now my friend John Culver. The Institute is succeeding well in its mission of linking the political and academic worlds. Professors are consultants to every agency of government. The Secretary of Labor is a Harvard professor, the Secretary of Health, Human Services, a former chancellor of the University of Wisconsin. Candidates for public office routinely seek out student audiences. Many of the leading political analysts for television, newspapers are academics. Other renowned places of higher learning, from UCLA to Tel Aviv, have established institutes modeled after this one. But this is no time to rest on any laurels. It's fitting that on the anniversary we ask what more we can do to make the Institute even more relevant and exciting in the future, and I'd like to make 4 suggestions. First, we can never be nonpartisan because all of us care too deeply about the challenges facing the country and the role of the political process in meeting them. But we should continue to be bipartisan and multipartisan with students, fellows, and speakers, representing all shades of opinion and all wings of political parties, and with programs that reach beyond party lines. Second, we should broaden the scope of our programs to include more people working levels of government and local and state officials. One criticism that can be legitimately made of the Institute over the years is that too many emphasis on big names to attract big audiences to the neglect of either the program managers, the budget makers, or local or state elected officials. They may not be renowned, but their long careers in public service make them well qualified to speak about the interface between politics and policy, whether we're talking about local or state officials, professionals. Third, I hope the Institute will resume the practice of issuing reports and recommendations on key political issues by faculty student groups assisted by students at the Kennedy School, pass recommendations on presidential transition, vice president selection, campaign financing reform, received wide attention, are still in use. I can remember in the 1960 campaign when my brother, after the convention in Los Angeles, had called up Clark Clifford, and he said, I want just one person to think about what I ought to do on the day of the election, when I'm elected. And after my brother was elected, and he went down to the armory, and he came back, and there on the table was the book that Clark Clifford, and he opened it for the first time, and it said, go out and take a walk, have a daiquiri, and have lunch and take a nap. And then in the late afternoon, these are the lists for Secretary of State and Defense that you ought to start thinking about. I hope the Institute, well, it's become more thoughtful, I guess, in these times. I'm not sure it's any better, but at least and for those pages actually continued all the way up to for some 30 days and outlined the way in which he proceeded in the selection of the cabinet. Third, I hope the Institute will resume the practice of issuing reports and recommendations on key political issues by faculty study groups assisted by students at the Kennedy School. So I mentioned that. Fourth, I hope the Institute will do more to combat the cynicism about politics so widespread today in so many communities and in the nation as a whole. We can be part of a needed effort to restore a sense of trust between the people and government. American experiment depends profoundly on a practical commitment by individual citizens to care enough to make self-government work, and we ignore the growing apathy and cynicism at our peril. I was encouraged by the event called HYPE that's been mentioned earlier this evening and was mentioned this afternoon, last September, where the Institute attracted 3,000 students to a day of voter registration and wide-ranging discussions of every kind of issue. It was one of the most promising achievements in the Institute's history, and all of you who made it possible can be proud of the result. President Clinton and the new Congress returned to Washington with an important agenda: find better ways to work together to strengthen the Social Security Medicare so they'll be ready to provide retirement security and health security when the massive population born after World War II begins to retire early in the next century. We must tackle the hidden entitlements, especially tax subsidies, which are the fastest growing part of the budget, which still escape the rigorous pressure that Medicare and Social Security now receive. We must make higher education more accessible and affordable. I'm especially enthusiastic about making the first 2 years of college, the 13th and 14th grades, as automatic as high school grades 11 and 12 are. The long struggle to expand health insurance to all Americans must go on. This year we took on an important step, the Kassenbaum-Kennedy bill. Next year I hope we can extend insurance protection to all children. Massachusetts has done it. John Kerry and I will do all we can to see that America does it too. We must reform the serious abuses in the current system of financing elections. I believe we all agree that big money makes bad politics. In my view, the Supreme Court is a major obstacle to reform because of its ruling in Buckley v. Valeo, 1976, that even reasonable restraints on campaign spending violate the First Amendment. The Supreme Court posed a similar obstacle to social reform in the 1930s, but after a bitter confrontation modified its interpretation of the Constitution. Perhaps the Court will do so again if Congress enacts, and I believe it can, a sufficiently sound and persuasive reform. Otherwise, I fear there may well be a dangerous but potentially irresistible push to amend the First Amendment, which has never been done in 200 years of our history. My hope is that in the coming months, Harvard and the Institute will help the country think through this difficult dilemma. There could be no greater public service. For my own part, I intend to do my best in Washington to see that the programs of the Institute are known and respected and supported by the leaders of the federal government. I believe as strongly as my brothers did that Harvard and other leading institutions of higher education in this country have not just the ability, but the responsibility to do the difficult research on which sound policy is founded, to subject government programs to critical analysis, to stand against simplistic solutions, and label outright demagoguery for which it is, and above all to inspire young men and women to become involved in public service at every level of their communities. If you continue to play that role here and others follow you, we can become once again the kind of land described in the phrase by John Buchan that President Kennedy loved so much, a land where public life is regarded as the crown of a career, and a young person is its worthiest ambition. Politics is still the greatest and the most honorable adventure. So I say to all of you, well done. The Institute has had a great 30 years, and may the next 30 years be even greater than the first. Thank you.
Before we close, ladies and gentlemen, I did want to introduce our Student Advisory Committee and ask each of them if they will stand. They're here. They're just modest. These are the folks. These are the engine and the energy of the Institute of Politics. And I might say to you, as many of you have actually said to me, the non-students in the crowd, that the one thing that has struck me over and over within a short time after I became director of the Institute of Politics was that while we define our mission as trying to inspire students to engage in politics and public service, time and time and time again, the political leaders that come through here and meet with our students tell me how inspiring it has been for them, how important to renew their values and renew their drive it has been to come in touch with our students. The inspiration works both ways, and so we owe a great debt to our students as we do to you folks in the audience. I want to also give our current chairman of the Senior Advisory Committee, Avery Gardner, a moment to announce something for those of you who were on the Student Advisory Committee sometime in the past.
Thank you, Phil. The Student Advisory Committee of 1996 would like to especially welcome the SAC alumni from throughout the years, and we're hoping that you can all join us for a special brunch for the current and former members of the Student Advisory Committee. Tomorrow morning, Saturday, from 10 until noon, we'll be in the Penthouse, and we want to talk about how the Institute has changed over the last 30 years, and also what an influence your IOP times have had on your careers after Harvard. So please, I know I talked with many of you on the phone last week, but for those whose phone numbers we couldn't find, please do join us tomorrow morning from 10 till 12 up in the Penthouse. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Avery. And thank you, Senator Kennedy, for your speech. We live in an era where it's obviously not easy to be a public official these days, given the widespread cynicism among many of our citizens, and we respect your service, your public service, Senator, as we respect the public service of many others here in the audience. But this cynicism among the public, as you alluded to in your speech, only heightens the importance of the work that we have to do here at the Institute of Politics, because we believe in the value of politics and public service. They are not only honorable ventures, they are absolutely critical to the protection of liberty and to building a secure and a just society. And as Aristotle believed, perhaps the way that we all develop our personal full potentiality and achieve happiness in this lifetime is by engaging in public life. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for engaging in our public life, being a part of our activities. We need you. We need you to be involved. We want to make a difference in this world. We appreciate your help. Thank you.